Our top story at this hour, the next country to join the line of financially troubled nations facing major debt issues could be the United States. The Congressional Budget Office has projected that the US could run out of money to pay its bills as soon as July, if the debt ceiling isn't raised by then. Here's what the Budget Office has said. Listen in.
The limit on debt of $31.4 trillion was reached on January 19th. Earlier this year, the Treasury began to take the well-established so-called extraordinary measures to borrow additional funds. We project that if the debt limit remains unchanged, the government's ability to borrow using these extraordinary measures will be exhausted between July and September of 2023, of this year.
Advocating for change in fiscal policy, the CBO director further stressed on the need to raise the debt ceiling, driven by past spending laws and tax cuts, some enacted under Joe Biden's Republican predecessor, Donald Trump.
So for this year, for 2023, we project stagnant output, rising unemployment, gradually slowing inflation, and interest rates that remain at or above the levels at the beginning of this year before the economy subsequently rebounds. Non-interest spending substantially exceeds revenues in our projections, and that's even though pandemic-related spending lessens. And then in addition, rising interest rates drive up the cost of borrowing. The resulting deficits steadily increase the government's debt. And over the long term, our projections suggest that changes in fiscal policy must be made to address the rising cost of interest and mitigate other adverse consequences of high and rising debt.
Earlier, Janet Yellen, who is the Treasury Secretary, said that measures to keep the U.S. funded would run out at some point this summer. The Congressional Budget Office said that the U.S. Treasury Department will exhaust its ability to pay all its bills sometime between July and September unless the current $31.4 trillion cap on borrowing is raised or suspended. The non-partisan Budget Office cautioned that a historic federal debt default could occur before July if the revenue flowing into the Treasury in April lags expectation. And that's the time when Americans typically submit their annual income tax filings. The pace of incoming revenues, coupled with the performance of the U.S. economy in coming months, is making it difficult for government officials to predict the exact date when the Treasury could begin to default on many debt payments. And so, to avoid a default, the government would have to delay making payments for some activities. According to reports, the annual U.S. budget deficits will average $2 trillion between 2024 and 2033, a forecast that is likely to stoke Republican demand for more spending cuts. The sobering analysis reflects the full impact of recent spending legislation, including investments in healthcare, clean energy, semiconductors, and higher military spending. The House of Representatives, controlled by the Republicans, wants to withhold the debt limit increase until the Democrats agree to deep spending cuts. Democrats in turn say that the debt limit should not be held hostage to Republican tactics over federal spending. 55% of U.S. adults said that they have heard little or nothing about the debate. 3/4 of respondents said that the Congress must reach a deal, as defaulting would add to their families' financial stress, largely through higher potential borrowing costs. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Have a look.
It's a warning by the Congressional Budget Office that the United States will add some $19 trillion to its national debt over the next 10 years as a result partly of entitlement programs, which make up about 60% of the country's national debt. Now, these are programs that no party in Washington wants to talk about or put on the chopping block because of political reasons, but has always been the elephant in the room. Apart from these programs, this year at least, costs like expanded health care to veterans, President Biden's climate tax bill, and generally military spending was the reason and the cost. The Budget Office also said that the U.S. economy this year will barely grow after adjusting for inflation, and that the unemployment rate will rise by 5%. It blamed and attributed this mostly to the slowdown in growth due to Federal Reserve policies. Ultimately, it said that Officials should be warned that in the long run, they need to make changes to the nation's fiscal course, which could come from rising taxes or cutting spending, or perhaps both. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.